All right, what is going on, guys? We are back for another excellent and exciting video, and today we are going to be talking about how to isolate your porn triggers and your femdom triggers. Now, you may be asking, what exactly is a trigger? But what I started to realize is that when I would come in contact with certain people, places, or things in my life, I started to recognize this pattern where I would come in contact with that trigger, and then the day after I would end up relapsing. And so I started diving into really asking myself, what am I being triggered by? And then why am I being triggered by that? And so as we progress through this video, I'm going to talk about how to really dive into your triggers and then try to isolate them, dissect them, and then figure out why exactly it is that you're being triggered by that. And then why is that then causing you to relapse on femdom or on porn, and then showing you exactly how you can isolate these and release them. And what I will say before we hop into the main content of this video is that yes, I did relapse recently. I am always gonna be 100% transparent and honest with you guys, and I didn't relapse on femdom or porn, but it was actually on TikTok. And so I had never really been on TikTok before, and I just started getting into it, and I got completely zoned out and just like basically jerked off for like a week straight watching TikTok videos. And so I will just say that, and while it's not as bad a relapse as like a destructive femdom relapse or porn relapse, that was my relapse recently, and I believe that I have worked through it and let go the reason, and I will dive into that specific trigger in the video. But full transparency, it did happen. So if you're wondering where I was at for last week, I was jerking off on TikTok. Anyway, without further ado, let's hop into the main content portion of this video, and I will see you there. So I had this realization over the last week or so, and it was really the idea and coming to terms with the fact that all addictions are merely ways to cover up either fear, self-doubt, shame, or guilt. Those are some of the big ones. And I've had a couple really illuminating conversations with some of the guys in the private groups and doing the private coaching. And they helped me actually work through a lot of this kind of almost problems that I think a lot of us have, to where, and I talk about this a lot, to where we're trying to actively fight the addiction. We're trying to actively fight femdom. We're trying to actively fight porn. And I'll just go out and say it's the wrong way to approach this. So, my content is always about trying to get to the root cause, trying to get to the source. And until you can do that, you can really never be successful, because you'll go periods of time and you may get better at going longer periods, but inevitably you'll end up relapsing again or falling off the wagon. And so that's been something recently that I've been really trying to work on. But I want to tie in your triggers, your relapse triggers, because this time around, and it can be almost aggravating when you work on this stuff. And that's why I always say from the start, I want you guys to drill in that you want to enjoy the process and you want to enjoy the journey, because if you don't get that instilled, you will be driving yourself insane. Because from my experience, what ends up happening is you start to work on yourself, you start to handle your addiction, and then you are able to figure out some ways that you can improve, and then something else triggers you and you end up relapsing. But the key is that every time that you get triggered and you relapse, now you know that that is a trigger for you. So always look at the process as enjoyable and optimistic. And I'll even go further and say, even when you're relapsing, don't fall into despair. Look at that period as merely a small little storm in the grand picture, right? A little ripple on the ocean, and that ultimately it's going to be okay. You're going to come out stronger. And one of the ways that you come out stronger is by now knowing that that was a trigger. So again, I'm going to tie in here some firsthand experience, and I think that, and this is going to be based off of my last TikTok relapse. I think it's going to be really informative and hopefully helpful for some of you guys who are struggling with some of the same things. So what I noticed was I lived by myself and my parents had gone away on vacation. So I was, I guess, kind of like house sitting for them. And so when I went to their house, I started feeling very infantile, and infantile in the sense like I had given my power away. And this is why I'm going to even take this a step further and say that for you guys that are maybe feeling like you lack a lot of power, and this might be a little bit of a radical thing to say, but you might want to just completely cut yourself off for a time being with your parents, you know, with your mom, with your dad, maybe with your siblings, because essentially I think when you have that relationship, and I'm not saying that you can't have a relationship, but if you have this kind of reliance on them, essentially you are being what I call infantile, meaning that you're relying on them. You're relying on them to kind of nurture you. And these things are great when you're 10 years old or when you're 5 years old, or maybe even when you're 15 years old. But if you're 25 years old, I actually think that they can be extremely destructive. So this is the realization that I had. And I kind of knew that I was going to have to completely cut myself off from my parents for the time being. Like I plan on, you know, obviously this is okay. Let me backtrack here and say that this is always coming from a place of love and empathy. So it's not saying that you have any sort of deceit or disdain or hatred or anything like that, right? It's always coming from acceptance, and it's always coming from love, but realizing that for you to continue to progress as a man, for you to continue to get these addictions handled, you're gonna have to probably, in certain situations, if you're like me, which I think a lot of you guys are, you're gonna have to wean yourself off from your parents so that you're, again, reclaiming more of that power back into your own self. This is crucial. It's something that is not easy to do, and you may even have to take it as far as just telling them this is what's up and then blocking their number. And we can go dive into that deeper, again, if you want to work on me in coaching. And even if you don't want to do any sort of one-on-one or group coaching, at least join Elevation Syndicate, because I've actually posted a couple kind of reflection videos over the last week of things that I was going through, and I'm always posting new things in there. So it's a completely easy way to hop in and kind of see some behind the scenes of what I'm working through and what other guys are working through. So hop into that private group. You can say anonymous in there or whatever. That's a good thing to do. Always post in there. But coming back to this realization of having to wean yourself off or even just completely isolate yourself from your parents is this idea that you're staying in this infantile mindset. And so, and I was actually talking about this with one of the guys in the group, where he was basically saying how any sort of porn addiction or feminine addiction is essentially you trying to just give away your power. And of course, on the front side, it's super easy to give away your power. Oh, just give power to mommy or daddy, or oh, just give power to the dom, or oh, just jerk off and numb yourself to watching porn, right? That's the easy thing, right? Again, I always talk about you get that +1 on the front end, but on the back end, it's draining you -10. So you're getting this quick dopamine hit, this quick kind of feeling of easing the pain, of numbing yourself, of not having to do any work. And of course, then all week I've had this just, I don't even want to say low level anxiety. I want to say like a pretty medium buzz of anxiety all week. And that's another thing that I want to touch on really quickly that I've been thinking about is listen to your biofeedback. What does that mean? Listen to that feeling in the pit of your stomach, that energy flow, right? You always have this kind of vibrational energy that's going through your body, and you can kind of feel it. It's either feels really good, like you're in that state or that flow. Super high end, you get into what's called a flow state. So whatever type of work that you're doing, it just kind of feels effortless, or it feels like you can just go on and you're almost gaining energy from doing work. On the opposite end, and this is what I was experiencing last week, almost any sort of little minimal amount of work seems almost impossible. And I'll even throw out the example of, like, I needed to get groceries. I couldn't even go to the grocery store, or I finally now today ordered groceries on like Amazon Grocer. Things like little tasks like that. I needed to get some other like basic supplies. Like, I couldn't even do that, right? So it's like, that's on the polar opposite end. And it's crazy how kind of contrasted they can be. But so this last week, it was like I had this anxiety that I could just feel buzzing through my body, and any sort of basic task I just literally couldn't do. And so essentially it happened because I was at my parents' house. So again, it's not that my parents are the enemy. It's not that your parents are the enemy. You should have good relationships with your parents. I think that's extremely important. But I also think that for a lot of you guys, and for me, it's important that you have periods of time where you just isolate yourself away, because it goes along the whole idea of reclaiming your power back to yourself, getting out of that little kind of baby or infantile or toddler or little kid mindset, right? And you have to go through this transition period. And I think that for most of us, we're never taught this. Of course, your parents don't really want you to do this in many ways. They subconsciously are basically kind of coddling you in many ways. And they actually kind of should be if they're good parents, right? They should love you so much, almost have so much love that it's like it spills over. But the problem is that when you're in your 20s or your 30s or whatever, and it's still spilling over, it actually has a detrimental effect on your ability to continue to kind of transcend to the next level and really become a complete boss as a man. So that was the realization that I had. That was my trigger. And so again, if you want to work on me, work on this stuff with me, just send me a message on Instagram, Facebook, join Elevation Syndicate. That's a great place to do it. But starting to dive into your triggers and realize that, okay, now that I isolated this, going to my parents' house as the trigger, it manifested itself in me having a relapse on jerking to TikTok for probably like 100 hours over the last week. It's just an insane amount. Like, I'm completely raw, and like, I never want to go on TikTok again. But it's so, the TikTok is not the problem, right? The jerking off to TikTok, it's the manifestation of feeling infantile, which is essentially being triggered by going to my parents' house, right? So it's always like kind of reverse engineering back. And I think that's why a lot of you guys really seem to have a lot of problems, and why most addicts in general have a ton of problems getting to the root cause, because it's like, fuck, like, I'm doing this on TikTok, I need to just get rid of TikTok, or I need to just, stop jerking off. And it's like, okay, that's going to help for a little bit. And, but then you're going to end up relapsing back again because you haven't taken out that source. And so it's really imperative here, and we're going to drill this in, that you start looking for patterns in your life that are then causing you to relapse on porn, or relapse on femdom, or just to be unproductive. And they will typically have a lot of major recurring themes, as in you have this fear, you have this self-doubt, you feel like you don't have any power, or you just feel kind of unworthy or guilty or undeserving for some reason. And that is stuff that joining into the groups and the coaching and doing the courses, we dive into that heavy and try to get to the source of what it is specifically for you, and then uncover it through your subconscious. Because what happens is we're not aware of these things that are really going on. And so we keep on stuffing them down into our subconscious. It's like a trash compactor that we're just shoving this junk back down into, and we never empty out that trash compactor. And so over time, it's like it starts to attract bugs and flies and starts to get super rancid and create a lot of problems. And so really diving into the subconscious to clear it is going to help getting rid of a lot of triggers. But the other important thing, I'm going to put my foot up here, is that while the subconscious work is what I call inner work, and it's super important, what is equally as helpful on the kind of external is to try to pinpoint the triggers. So in this example with me, I knew that going to my parents' house was causing the trigger. And so it is radical, but I'm not gonna go there for a period of time. I would say probably at least 6 months to a year, I won't go there. I'll have to figure out what I do like over the holidays, if I want to do that or not. But it's like anything else. Like if you're allergic to a certain type of food, and we can work on this stuff too, because I actually think that food is a massive trigger if you're eating foods that are making you inflamed. And that's another thing too. Whenever I relapse, I eat the junkiest food. This past week, I ate Burger King, a bunch of 7-Eleven, I got Popeyes, I got pizza. I was just loading in, and I noticed that basically all the areas in my life that are typically usually on a kind of upward spiral just tank. Like everything, the food that I eat. I was sniffing poppers too this past week. Didn't brush my teeth for several days. Like all these different elements that I'm normally like on point with that are pushing me, just general hygiene stuff even, I just completely tanked this past week. And it's really interesting how that dark energy, when it gets a hold of you, will manifest not just in porn addiction or femdom addiction, but in all areas, all the way down to not brushing your teeth or not taking out the garbage or whatever it is. So going back to trying to isolate exactly what your trigger is, and even if you don't do the subconscious work, which ultimately you have to do, I don't think there's any way to get around that. But if you at least can acknowledge what the trigger is, you can cut it out, almost like you find that tumor that in your body, that cancerous lump, and you don't know why it got there, but you can cut that shit out. And when you cut it out, if it hasn't spread, if it hasn't metastasized, you can hopefully eliminate that problem. So essentially by here, not going to my parents' house, you're cutting out the tumor. And I don't like to say it that way because again, it sounds incredibly radical. These are the things that you have to do. Similar to parents might be certain people that you have in your life. They might be siblings, they might be close friends. A lot of times I'll see people will tell me that they feel like they've outgrown their childhood friends, yet they still live in the same town or close by, and those friends they still kind of hang out with, and they feel like they've kind of elevated themselves, but their friends are then kind of clawing them down. And I think I have a few other videos where I talk about this, to where subconsciously people will, it's not malicious, but when they see someone trying to like get too far ahead of the pack, they'll try to pull them back because they're afraid of losing that person. And it's going to happen, right? So your parents are doing the same thing. They're trying to pull you back, not maliciously, but because they love you and they don't want to lose you. That's really, for the most part, what it comes down to. Now, of course, there's going to be examples of psychopath parents or sociopath parents that are maliciously doing something because they're getting like a high from it or something like that. That's going to be a much lesser extent, but for the most part, they love you. It's just that they love you so much that they are trying to pull you back closer to them because they don't want to lose you. And so always come from that frame of having that love for the person or the thing, realizing that these people likely don't know that they're doing this, and sometimes you may be able to talk to them and let them know what's up, but other times it really might be easiest to just cut the situation off for a time being. Maybe even with people, like if it's childhood friends, might even have to be permanently. And that's just what it is. You have to look out for your own good first, right? I always say you can't ultimately help other people until you've really helped and rebuilt yourself. So you got to put on your own airplane mask when the plane's out of oxygen before you can start helping other people. That's just the way that it is. And so don't feel bad if you have to distance yourself, because I think that for me, what I realized is that some things you just have to eliminate. Another example that I have, I forget who was talking about this. I think it might have been Elliot Holst. He was essentially saying how he didn't like horror movies. So it's not like, the solution is not to watch more horror movies if you don't like them, to try to numb yourself to it, because you could do that. And oftentimes that's why we stay in these femdom porn addictions for so long, because they do a really great job at just numbing. They do a great job at taking your mind off of it, putting you into the derp state to where you don't have to think on your own. You stay in that infantile state, and they're really good at that. But essentially, it's not, you don't want to numb yourself by doing that. So going back to the horror movie, it's not that, the answer is not, I don't like horror movies, I'm just going to watch more of them so I become so numb to it that I can watch it. The answer is you stop watching the horror movie. And by cutting that out, it's just common sense that that's going to be the fastest, most successful, and most direct approach to getting rid of the source, which is then going to take out the addiction. Because remember, the addiction, this is key, the addiction is not what you want to fight against. It's that low level fear, self-doubt, unworthiness, and feeling uneasy. That kind of refrigerator vibration that's always going. That's what you want to take out. And then when you take that out, we're going to work on this, we're going to get it handled. Take that out. Then the extraneous addictions will dissolve away. And I'll just wrap up by saying that, and I reiterate this a lot, and you guys know that it is a process, it takes a lot of work. And even for me, I've been working on this stuff for a while. This was a new trigger. I won't make this mistake again, or if I do decide to go there, I'll know how to do a bunch of release work ahead of time, or I'll know how to kind of come out of it all right. But when you start working on this stuff, you're gonna pinpoint one trigger, and you're gonna dive into that, release the junk that's accumulated in your subconscious, let it go. You learn, you kind of declutter that area. And you might go another couple days, couple weeks, maybe it's another couple months, and then another one that you didn't realize, a new trigger will pop up, same process again. And so it takes a long time to get to the point to where you won't have any sort of kind of fear or self-destructive nature that's manifesting, because it takes a while to kind of learn how to pinpoint these triggers. And the good news is that every time that you can isolate a trigger, you're getting a substantial step closer to really creating that core identity that's not going to be driven on fear. It's not going to be driven on any sort of anxiety, any sort of feelings of not being worthy, or any sort of destructive nature. And that's where we're pushing, and I'm pushing all of you guys to get to. I am definitely was pretty devastated this past week, and it's something also too to where I'm always telling guys, like, when this happens, try to learn how to get, not only pinpoint the trigger, but try to get out of it as fast as possible. And I think that was really my biggest regret, if I have any, about this, because I always look at it as optimistically, but was that I stayed in it for like several days too long. But again, it's really hard because, and I know this is kind of metaphysical, but the dark energy, when it starts to take a hold of you, it's like a black hole to where it sucks things into it. And so then my diet went down the tubes. I wasn't sleeping well. I got a bottle of poppers. I, again, wasn't showering, wasn't brushing my teeth. Like all these elements that just like create that basic routine just completely disintegrated over the last week. And so when everything in your life is tanking, it's really hard. And one way to do it is just try to start out your day, even if you know you're going to relapse that day, try to start out the first couple hours of your day and have them be productive. So let's say you wake up at 7 in the morning, try to have at least minimum to like 9 or 10 in the morning to where you're doing work, or you're trying to not negative loop, or you're brushing your teeth, you're going for a walk. You're doing things that are progressing you in the right direction. So at least the day is not a zero. And that is really another key point, is trying to not have days that are just complete washes. Even if you know you're not on point, you're not going to be 100% on point all the time. And sometimes you're going to look at a little bit of TikTok or whatever, maybe even a little bit of porn, but not just indulging in it all day and having all the other areas in your life completely going down the crapper. And with that, I think we are going to wrap this video. I'm always going to be completely, like I said, transparent with you guys. I'm working on this stuff. I think I know this trigger now, and I really encourage you guys to hop into the groups and the coaching and the courses, because it's an open place where you can actively talk about this. And again, a couple of the guys that I was talking to actually helped me work through a lot of these ideas, coming to the realization of this kind of infantile mind state and why that's directly linked with porn and femdom. And we're really just trying, or I should say, I'm trying to build this, we're trying to build this kind of real tight-knit warrior group to where we can bounce ideas off of each other, have revelations, have ideas, network with other kind of elements in our life. And that is really the goal of the groups, the courses, and the mentoring. And so with that, I'm glad to have kind of gotten this off my chest. I actually debated for like the last hour or so if I wanted to film this video. The idea, I knew I wanted to talk about triggers and pinpointing them, but I wasn't sure if I wanted to talk specifically about the one that I experienced recently. But start to dive into where the triggers are in your life. Realize that porn and femdom is the external, and that's actually not what you want to fight against. It's that trigger. And what is the trigger coming from? It's coming from usually deep fear or feelings of unworthiness or self-doubt. It's generally what is causing that. So we're going to dive into that, get rid of all that clutter, and then all the extraneous addictions on the external will dissolve. Keep up the great work. Post your comments down below, join the groups, post some of the links, and I really enjoy talking with all you guys. You guys help me as much as I help you, and we're building the groups up as much as we can. I want it to be just a place where, again, we can bounce ideas, really build a tight-knit syndicate where we're just moving in an upward spiral as much as we can. When some of us fall off, we're there to help pick you back up, and that's what it's all about. So again, appreciate being able to vent this off, and hope you guys enjoyed it. I'll post the links somewhere here or wherever, and I really look forward to working with you guys, talking with you guys. Keep up the great work. I love you guys. I'm out.